Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's forum. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis. Today, we will focus on one of the most impressive business, social, and cultural movements in the world, the story behind the Mondragon Cooperatives. Our guest today, Isabel Uribe, worked at Saiolan, which is a business and innovation center at the Mondragon Cooperatives. She worked there many years and was a lecturer at the Praxis Mondragon seminar at least a few times. And her PhD paper was on the challenges and opportunities for the Mondragon cooperative companies in the face of globalization. I'm sure some people on the call will be interested in that topic too. So learning how others overcame adversity and built a new social structure that triumphed over the repression of the Franco era is just the kind of information we need today. So I'm excited to welcome Isabel today for this uplifting experience and one that indeed proves another world is possible. So welcome, Isabel.
Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. I am very glad to have your presence at this talk on the inspiring origins of Mondragon Cooperatives. And I warmly appreciate your participation, and especially thanks the Practice Peace Institute and you, Mrs. Georgia Kelly, for your vision and support, which made this meeting possible.
Thank you.
And also, I admire your commitment to building a more just, sustainable, and peaceful society through education and civic participation.
Thank you for that, Isabel. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, I'm very committed to the whole worker-owned concept. And before I ask you a first question, I just wanted to make sure everyone is familiar with the Mondragon Cooperatives, which is the largest complex of worker-owned businesses in the world. They're located in the Basque region of Spain. And the visionary and founder of this extraordinary accomplishment was a Catholic priest named Father Jose Maria Arizmendiarrieta. But today we're going to learn about the man who helped Father Arizmendiarrieta, because we don't learn about him so much in the, yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's mute because I'm hearing lots of other noise. We don't hear much about Jose Maria Ormaetxea in our seminars, and Isabel has written or co-written an extraordinary book about him and with interviews with him before he passed on somewhere in his 90s. I don't remember how old he was, but he was one of the movers and shakers with the priest in terms of creating the Mondragon Cooperatives. So I want to just to give that background, and now I wanted to go to you, Isabel, to ask you about your work at Saiolan, which was a business and innovation center. So first tell us a little bit about what that center does, what it is, and then something about your work there too.
Hey, well, I first, I think it's interesting for you to know that I'm from Guadalajara, Mexico, and Copresi, which is one of the Mondragon co-ops, has an implantation here in my hometown. And that's the reason how I visited Mondragon for the first time in November 1999. And it was a 1 week long visit. And one of those stops was at Saiolan. What is Saiolan? Saiolan is a business and innovation center. It's a center aimed at supporting the creation of employment. And it was founded within the University of Mondragon, the Polytechnic School, that's the engineering faculty. And it was founded back in 1985. And it was, they were in the intersection of, I mean, the founders were two professors. They worked with existing co-ops and not co-ops, with companies, like a technical office somehow. They were professors at the university and had direct contact with students. They knew the needs of the industry. And at those years, business incubators were not as extended as today, but they identified the opportunity because there was a big need of unemployment. Even people who studied at the university, the unemployment rate was about 50%. So it was like, well, we have the knowledge, we have the people, we have the relationship and all those synergies with the enterprise. And they launched Saiolan as an added training for technicians who didn't know about business, about market, about validating an idea as a business opportunity and all that kind of things. In fact, the logo of Saiolan is like a piece of jigsaw puzzle, which is this idea of that training, additional training. And the main, let's call them clients, Saiolan works with are both individual entrepreneurs, people who want to set up a new business, and existing companies. Many of them co-ops of Mondragon, supporting them in identifying new business opportunities, diversifications.
Do they also work with companies that are not part of the Mondragon Cooperatives?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct, because at the end of the day, well, the main objective was and is supporting the creation of employment in general. And then if regarding individual entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs decide what kind of company they want to create. What happens in Mondragon is that since they suckle the culture of cooperativism, they are more likely to decide to create a co-op. And also the laws have changed, the legislation has changed. And for instance, I know of one group of entrepreneurs, they were three of them, they wanted to create a co-op, but they couldn't because they had to be at least 5 of them. And some years later, I mean, they started working, and then I think that sometimes it's even more important to have that culture, those values. And what happened in this example is that some years later, they changed the legal form of the company once they were 5 people. And well, the point is that general support for employment, the creation of new employment, and also because it was compulsory for Saiolan, if we wanted, well, at that time, to intermediate government loans and grants, we had that opportunity. Saiolan was created as a limited society. Most of the members of Saiolan were cooperative members of the Polytechnic School, but this very entity had the form of a limited society, and we could intermediate those government loans and grants open to the general public.
Wonderful.
And
I don't think we went to Saiolan last time, but hopefully we will again this time. It's an incredible building as well. I really liked going there. The book that you wrote, which I wanted to tell people about, and they can get it on Amazon. I know that because I've already looked. It's called Mondragon Collective Intelligence, Solidarity, and Competitiveness. It's an incredible book and very, very insightful. I got so much from it. And so I want you to tell us about the man that you interviewed, Jose Maria Ormaetxea, his background and how he became so important to the building of the Mondragon Cooperatives along with Father Arizmendiarrieta.
Well, in fact, I believe that to know Jose Maria Ormaetxea is also to know the origins and the development of Mondragon cooperative movement. He has been a key person. And as you may know, the Mondragon experience began with the priest Jose Maria Arizmendiarrieta. It began to take shape when he arrived to Mondragon on 1941, when he was 25 years old. And it was the Mondragon of the post-war period. Those were very harsh years, very difficult years. The society was divided between the people who won the war and the people who lost the war. It was a very complicated situation, but then a vital encounter took place when Father Arizmendiarrieta met the young people at Mondragon, and these young people were around 15 years old, more or less like that. And these young people then became the founders of this experience. Among them was Jose Maria Ormaetxea. And Father Arizmendiarrieta and Ormaetxea met as Father Arizmendiarrieta was in charge of taking care of the young people in Mondragon. And one of his responsibilities or his actions was being a professor at the company where Ormaetxea was working at that time, which was the Unión Cerrajera de Mondragon. The Mondragon, I don't know how to translate that.
Would you say that again?
Unión Cerrajera de Mondragon. Cerrajera is like
security.
Smithlock.
Yeah,
but well, it's not that important, the name, but the thing is that it was the main company in Mondragon. It was very powerful. I mean, it could even decide or have, a weight to decide who was in the local government and things like that. They had a place where people would buy food and I don't know how to say that in English, but what I mean is that it was not only the main business, but also had a very, very important role in Mondragon, paternalistic. And that's where
so there's a social role.
Ormaetxea was at that time being an apprentice at the only training education that was at that time at Mondragon, and it was these companies, the Unión Cerrajeras training apprentice school. And Father Arizmendiarrieta there was in charge of a class kind of sociology, and he raised awareness about what the main problems in Mondragon were, where were the living let's say, the people who were more involved in their community, because he also had other initiatives around the parish. For instance, study circles or cultural initiatives. Oh, let's bring somebody to Mondragon. And the important thing is that there were 15 years since Arizmendiarrieta arrived to Mondragon to the creation of the first co-op. During those years, Arizmendiarrieta identified and gave these young people the openness to trust in the future, because they were kind of, yes, they didn't really know like what is life for and what we are doing here, and how can we change this situation, which is so unjust, so unfair. So Father Arizmendiarrieta gave them guidance. And in those 15 years, he identified the key person in turning into reality the ideas he had. Because Father Arizmendiarrieta, he was always a priest. He never ceased to be a priest. The operational people who carried out the daily co-op work were those young men, among whom Ormaetxea stood out for his vision and his ability to turn ideas into reality. Imagine, he was 19 years old when he was in charge of the foundry at the Unión Cerrajera de Mondragón, which with more than 100 people under his responsibility. He was very, very talented, very talented. And Father Arizmendiarrieta was so intelligent. I mean, he really knew what people select to work with. And you will hear or may have heard of the 5 founders, the pioneers. Mm-hmm. And the key person that there was Ormaetxea in, as I mentioned before, turning those ideas into reality. I mean, the execution of the projects, this decision making to shape ideas, problem solving. They knew one could support on one another.
Yeah, I want to just interject here because I think this is a very interesting point, and I'm not sure why we have never really heard much about it in our seminars in Mondragon. I never really understood until reading your book that Ormaetxea was so impactful in the realization of Arizmendiarrieta's vision. And like you said, he was always a priest, and so there was only so much he was going to be able to do in terms of bringing the cooperatives into reality. And his selection of Ormaetxea was a brilliant idea, and obviously he was up to the job. But that's what I found fascinating, that here was this person who helped make it a reality that we very often didn't learn much about at all, except we would see him. And before he passed on, we would see him in Mondragon. We would, after our sessions, Ormaetxea was one of these people who went to church every day. So we would see him at the end of the day when he went to the evening or late afternoon mass. But a very interesting person. And what I, of course, got from both reading your book and, of course, knowing about Arizmendiarrieta is the ethical morality, the values. They're so steeped in it. And as what you were saying, the 15-year period from when Arizmendi arrived in Mondragon to when there was actually the first cooperative formed was a time of education, a time of really creating the atmosphere for a new world view to take root. And that particular time frame is actually quite short for a society to completely change like it did. And that's some of what I want to get into because I've been very interested in this sociological or anthropological change that happened in the region, partially or maybe wholly attributed to Arizmendi and then to Ormaetxea, what they were able to accomplish. I wanted to just do a quote that you have in your book, and then I want to go back to a question But you mentioned in the book that in a democratic society, information, critical judgment, reasoning, dialogue, and opinion are indispensable. And the quote from Ormaetxea, if you don't know what is going on, how can you have an opinion or pass a judgment? To ask a question, you first need knowledge. Now, that's something that in our society, they don't ask questions. They usually think they know. So this idea of going back to learn something so you can ask a question that's not rhetorical or not a cliche or not a gotcha question, but a real question, a real inquiry. And that level of honesty and integrity is something I really admire in Mondragon. And I wondered if you wanted to speak anything about that, because to me, the values and ethics that are imbued in this worldview are so important and why it continues to thrive today.
Well, thinking of Ormaetxea, and if you have the opportunity to read the book, at the beginning there is a chapter about Ormaetxea's personal history.
Mhm.
What I want to say is that the family is very important. Where we come from, our families are our first foundation. Okay, so he was from this family, had a series of experiences. Then Arizmendiarrieta, Father Arizmendiarrieta, arrived to Mondragon. And as I mentioned, at that time, Ormaetxea was attending the apprentice school at the Unión Cerrajera of Mondragon. And he, in one of the interviews, for example, he gave us the example. We were there, and Father Arizmendiarrieta would talk about distributive justice. And we were kind of distributed justice. We were just checking up waiting for the time the session ended, because on Saturdays afterwards they would play football, and they were more at that time interested in playing football, but nevertheless those kinds of terminology and themes that Arizmendiarrieta brought into the sessions with these young people um, were the seed to much bigger things, even if at that time they didn't fully understand what the implications of such things. And I think that it arose feeling also co-responsible for what was going on in the society. And I also believe that all those little activities regarding, there's a very well-known orchestra director coming to Mondragon. Let's set up a session in the town. I mean that feeling that we belong to this place. We want this place to change. We want this place to be a better place where to live. So, okay, there's somebody coming. So what do we need? We need money. We need to, uh, I mean, promote the event, etc. And those little things were um, educational. They were then educated, not only the theories. Let's talk about this person or that person. And I must also mention that Father Arizmendiarrieta was, he would read a lot. He was, who was very curious about new things and reading, and he transmitted those um, those things to these young people. For instance, there was more and more companies in other countries where employees had more active participation within the companies, not only a voice, but also a vote. And it was kind of, how can we change the structure of the existing companies and introduce those ideas? What are the implications? But the implications, very, very, I mean, you can touch them. Let's say once the co-ops were created, I mean, we can talk about solidarity. What is solidarity? Blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, that meant that during 20 years or something like that, the differences between the person who had the lowest wage and the bigger were from 1 to 3. And that's solidarity in action.
Yes.
I don't know if...
Yeah, and now it's I think 1 to 6, but that's the idea that the solidarity and the distributive justice, which you mentioned before, all these ideas that were part of Arizmendi's ethics, I guess, and beliefs and what they were promoting through the creation of the cooperatives, the philosophy always came through. And I think what has been interesting to me is that many of the people, because there's so many people who work in the cooperatives now, it's like 80 some thousand, 85,000. There's so many people that many of the later worker members haven't been educated in the same way. I mean, they have it in the society and in the social milieu, but I thought it was very interesting that now at Mondragon, they are having some of the worker owners come and be educated in the whole system for special classes, which I think is a great idea and great that they're doing that. I do want to open it up if people want to ask you anything. I think there was something more I wanted to say. Well, yeah, one other thing that I think is really interesting about Mondragon and about Arizmendiarrieta was the locating what needs were in the society, not creating a business just to create a business, but to ask the question first, what does the society need? What does this town need? Then we look about creating the business for it. And so often in our society, people look at creating a business first rather than what is the need. So it's almost like a reverse idea. And how do you have any idea how they go about identifying a need to create a business for it? Or is that?
Well, yes, I can tell you in general. And well, Arizmendiarrieta arrived to Mondragon on 1941. And as I mentioned, it was this very important company, the Unión Cerrajera of Mondragon, which had this apprentice school, which was exclusive for the sons of actual workers or brothers, I mean, relatives of those workers, and allowed, imagine, about 14 students for each promotion. And what about the rest of the town of Mondragon, of 5,000 inhabitants? So Father Arizmendiarrieta recognized how important it was to have other people the opportunity to have that technical training, to know to work with your hands, let's say it. So it was 3 years later that another school was opened in Mondragon, so that other people who had not the opportunity to attend the apprentice school could actually have this technical training. Technical plus what we have talked about before, that training regarding values and things like that.
Yeah.
So what happened is that 15 years later, by that time, I mean, 15 years after Father Arizmendiarrieta arrived to Mondragon, Ormaetxea and other of the founders of Mondragon, like Gorroñogoitia, Alfonso Gorroñogoitia, were workers at the Unión Cerrajera de Mondragon and had some positions with responsibility. They were directors of some areas like that. And the first thing they wanted to do, it was changing the existing company. There was I don't really ampliación de capital, the social capital of the company. It was a possibility of the Unión Cerrajera. The circumstance is that it había una ampliación del capital.
Is this the one they tried to convert to a worker owned, but it didn't happen? So that they created their own?
Okay. Well, the thing is that the social capital of the company of the Unión Cerrajera, they needed more social capital in that company, and this group of young people, I mean, Ormaetxea, Gorroñogoitia, Usa Torre, etc., they first asked the Unión Cerrajera de Mondragón that they could not only have a voice, but a vote, and they could enter the social capital of the company.
I want to interrupt here because I think people won't understand what you're talking about. Is that the company that you're talking about was not a cooperative. It was a regular business.
Yes, it was
these five people are trying to change the company by having not only a voice and a vote, and the company did not want to change.
Thank you for this.
And because they didn't want to change, these five young people decided to create their own cooperative,
and they were told that the son of the blue collar worker must remain a blue collar worker. Mm-hmm. And so that since they couldn't change that existing company, it was like, okay, let's set up a different company starting, but the capacities they had at that company, and in Mondragon, there is a very important tradition in forging and metallurgical metallurgy. So they knew how to work with steel plates and like that. And then they had the opportunity to acquire an existing company, which was located in another town different from Mondragon. It was in Vitoria, which produced stoves that worked on oil
these
stoves.
Are kerosene stoves.
Kerosene, thank you. Kerosene stoves. So they bought that. There was this. What is important is that it's coherent. The capacities they had, what they had to work with the company they bought. The first products they started to produce, and it was the time when the Franco dictatorship, you had to have the permit to set up a new business from Madrid. It was centralized. So, well, they had that opportunity of buying this company, because first they tried to set up a different company, but they didn't get the permission from the central government. But well, what is interesting here also is that intuition and that drive to, well, in this way we can't let's find another way to accomplish this objective of having a different company. And I must also say that they never had in mind, let's create a cooperative. No, it was, let's create a company with a different system. And in fact, Priest Arizmendiarrieta and other person worked on a model they called the total society model. And it was not allowed as a new form of company. But what Priest Arizmendiarrieta found is that the legal form of the cooperatives was the legal form that better suit to cover that ideal company they had.
Right. No, I get that.
And in the history, it has been repeated that, okay, let's start working. And once they have that experience, the legal issues
They can make
have
more.
adapted so that to better support the experience.
The growing cooperatives. Yeah, and I wanted to mention, so we have a question coming up too, so I want to be able to lead this to people who have questions. Yeah, and if you do have questions, raise your hand. It's easier for me to find you if you know how to put the automatic hand up, which Jerry does. I'm going to call on him in a minute. I just wanted to mention one thing is that Polytechnic School that was founded by Arizmendiarrieta is now today Mondragon University with three branches. So it evolved. So Jerry, what you want to go ahead and ask something? You'll need to unmute.
Yes. You hear me?
Yes, let's
Okay.
speak up a little bit.
Okay. So, how important is ethnic homogeneity, do you think, in the success of the Mondragon cooperative movement?
What did you say? How important is what?
Ethnic homogeneity. The fact that most of the people in the area were of the same ethnicity.
Oh, okay. Did you understand
Ah,
that?
ethnicity, yes. Um, I don't, well, if you, I'm thinking about also the geography of Mondragon, the valleys and the mountains, those mountains are like natural boundaries and ethnicity. Well, more than ethnicity, I wouldn't say ethnicity. I'd rather think about culture, being Basque. I think that's the important issue. The things related to the values of the Basque people. For instance, they are very committed to work. They are the value of the word has a value.
And
It is
respect.
true that and respect. It's true that it helps a lot that more or less you know all the people. I mean, but yes, it helps a lot. Imagine when new, well, in the history of Mondragon, it was very, very important the role that the new offices of the bank of then it was called Caja Laboral Popular. Nowadays it's Laboral Cucha. And they opened different offices in different regions. And when they were opened, imagine that they hired people from that place, and that people had the opportunity to share moments with their friends in those little towns. And
Now you're talking about towns outside of the Basque region, right?
within the
Oh,
Basque
okay,
region,
because they did
outside
have,
from Mondragon.
right.
And but there are places, I mean, they even in a bar or in a group of friends, I've seen there can be very different friends with very blue collar workers and CEOs from companies, and they share a drink at a bar at the town or the family. I mean, that helps a lot,
Mhm.
knowing what is going on in
Were they
there.
mostly the same religion?
Well, then,
Regarding religion, most of them, I would say the Catholics. And I think that Catholic values, like
but
values, were very important.
What,
But
but they're not
it,
most of them are not practicing Catholics any longer, but they hold the values.
I'm thinking
but
about the origins mainly.
Yeah, that's
the
the
issue
origin.
that I'm trying to raise is whether that similarity of backgrounds makes it easier to create a system where there's more of a sense of sharing than in a really diverse culture like ours.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's this, it's not that diverse, and it did have that same Catholic background, but I would say it was like the liberation theology kind of Catholicism with a strong focus on values, social connection, um, respect,
I
solidarity.
think if I can add here this
Yeah,
reflection, Father Arizmendiarrieta, he would say like ideas divide us, needs unite us.
good point. I did,
Because,
yeah.
for example, Catholics, Franco was Catholic in Mondragon. The priests that were before Arizmendiarrieta arrived to Mondragon were fusilados, shot to death. They were Catholics.
Mhm.
So it was not only a matter of
Right. Really.
being a Catholic or not. But this drive idea of needs unite us was very, very important because even in the town, it wasn't that important that once some people were Catholic or not Catholic, Basque or not Basque. It was the people who won the war and the people who lost the war.
Mhm.
Those differences were even more important. And I also acknowledge how intelligent Father Arizmendiarrieta was. So he was awarded with the Medalla del Mérito, work merit, a recognition for working from the Franco's government. Imagine they were in Mondragon and they knew they had to have a very close contact and relationship with Madrid and the center for permits, for a lot of things. I mean, Arizmendiarrieta, Father Arizmendiarrieta and Ormaetxea traveled a lot very often to Madrid and knew key people, and it was very, very important because those were the people who later on opened the doors and were allies of this experience, no matter if they were active Catholics or not, no matter if they were Catholics um, like very in line with Franco or not.
Yeah, because there were two types. There were the ones that were supporting Franco and the ones that weren't. And I think going back to what you were saying about uh, Arizmendi saying ideas divide us, needs unite us. I think that's such a profound, simple but profound idea, is because we fight over ideas. But if we have needs and that we can see together how they bring us together, it's a very important thing. And he was dealing with those two factions, the people who supported Franco, because there were those in Mondragon, and the people who opposed Franco. So he had those two kinds of people to work with in Mondragon. And that's often overlooked, like everything was homogenous. Well, it wasn't. There were definitely divides in that town.
And at that time, there were not so many people from abroad, but nowadays, well, it's different. And
Yes.
I think that the principle they have of open door is part of this openness
Hmm.
to have the person first, no matter other issues that may be more circumstantial.
Right. I agree. Does anyone want to say anything else or have a question? I think maybe you did, Ricky, and I saw something in the chat, but then I can't look back and find it. Did you want to say something, Ricky? He's mute. Or it looks like Michelle came back, so she must want to, Michelle must want to say something.
Yeah, so thank you so much for enlightening us about even more about Mondragon. And I will get your book. I have
Oh, you'll love it.
I had a question though on this spreading of this philosophy and the co-worker, you know, arrangements. Is it spreading at all outside of the Mondragon area? And are people wanting to move into Mondragon? I don't know if is it popular for people to want to move there?
Uh, well, Mondragon has been has attracted a lot of people to work there. Even nowadays, or when I lived there, uh, people from Bilbao and other cities would drive 1 hour, 1 hour and a half to go to work to Mondragon. I mean, that's for sure. When I first arrived to Mondragon, it was difficult for me to find a place where to stay for those first 2 months because there were a lot of people from outside living there, attending university or working in the companies. So yes, but there are also other poles where these kind of companies are located in the Basque country, like Marquina, like, well, if I say the names, it will be the same for you, but imagine that different regions and the different important companies
Right.
there. And the other part of the question was,
Uh, of the desire for people to move to Mondragon, from maybe a surrounding area or something. Is there any migration into Mondragon just because people have found out how successful it's been, or
um, if we look back in the history of Mondragon, I can also tell you that during some years there was a very important development in economy and in companies. So the companies, the co-ops, needed people to work there. So it was like we're hiring. And a lot of people from the south of Spain and other regions of Spain came to Mondragon. So when you go to Mondragon, you will find that that mixture of origins in the people who nowadays live in Mondragon. I would say that mainly during those years of that gilded age in in, in this development. Nowadays, I think that the international presence of Mondragon and the relationships created, for instance, me, I'm there because Copresi is in Guadalajara. I went there because of that. So that has somehow opened the door for other people from other places to go to Mondragon. And and I think it's been like that.
And
Right.
I've noticed the last time, well, not this is the last time, but the last several times I've gone, there are people from other countries that have moved to
Oh, yeah.
Mondragon. In fact, I mean, you'll see some women with headscarves who have come from Pakistan, and they have a kebab restaurant that they run. It's a
Wow.
family thing. So there are people who've come from other countries as well as other parts of Spain. So it's
Yes,
interesting. It wasn't
not
like that
not
the first time I went.
maybe not directly to work in industrial companies,
Right.
which has a, I mean, if we think about Spain, the country, and migration issues, I think that in general, migration in the Basque country has been like people who go there and work in the kind of enterprises that you can find there. Some of them industrial and high tech companies. So you have to have that training so that to be able to work there. And for instance, there is like a chain of not that chain. A lot of people from Pakistan now have grocery stores in
Mhm.
different towns in the Basque country. And well, it's different working at your grocery store or Chinese bazaars
A restaurant. There's a Chinese
like
restaurant.
that.
Yeah,
And that migration, which is independent from the cops, has
right.
also
Exactly.
arrived.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's
Also.
independent from the co-ops. It's a different business,
And
usually
and I
family business.
and I can tell you that the first time I went to Mondragon, it was very difficult for me to understand what was that, because sometimes we think of Mondragon like a monolithic thing, one thing, and there are so many different Mondragons taking place. Mondragon is like a paradigm, a set of experiences. So it's that is that it is somehow like that image of the elephant. Is
Yeah,
it the tusk or the leg or the tail?
yeah,
And it's very interesting because there are different uh, co-ops and not co-ops like Saiolan, as I mentioned. The legal form was not a co-op, but the role and the contributions to this social and economic development is important, and it's like open to that. So um, for me, it's part of the wealth of Mondragon that those different kinds of um, uh, experiences taking place at the same time. And I think you are visiting also not only Mondragon, but also San Sebastian and the newest faculty of Mondragon University,
hmm Yeah, this year we will visit
which is
the university in Oñati.
culinary.
We'll actually have we'll have some sessions at the University in Oñati, and we're going to go to the Culinary Center, which is also part of Mondragon University, have lunch and a tour there in San Sebastian. So yeah, we have some nice things planned this year, which will be,
Yes.
show a whole uh, variety of what the Mondragon cooperatives are all about.
And here, for example, back in 1943, Arizmendiarrieta identified that need of having education for the people who were not lucky enough to access the Unión Cerrajera de Mondragón Apprentices School. So that was the origin, the seed of the Polytechnic School.
Mm.
That is one co-op. Oñati, Empresa Ginza, that's a different co-op. And then the newest one, the Culinary Center.
Mhm.
And there's also another faculty in the humanity and the educational sciences faculty.
Is that
Each
in
one of them is a co-op. And then there is a second degree co-op, which is the University of Mondragon.
Okay, I don't think we'll get into that detail today. They'll they'll give us that detail when we're in Mondragon. Yeah, there's different levels of co-ops, and
Yes.
the university is a different level. The bank is a different level, and it's a little more complicated than to get into in a couple of minutes. So, I think we'll save that for the seminar. But I wanted to thank you so much, Isabel, for being with us today and taking the time to tell us about Mondragon and about Ormaetxea, who I really never had heard much about until I read your book, which I will again highly recommend. And Ricky and Michelle, you're going to be with us in October, which is exciting. Isabel, you should have them bring you back to Mondragon.
Yeah,
That would be fun.
yeah.
Going on there. Regarding Saiolan, we will see.
I'm going to
Uh,
stop the
and
recording.
well, I'd love to.
I'm going to, okay, wait a minute. What am I doing here? I want to stop the recording, but I don't want to end this session. You know, they change the things here all the time.